Good. Where are we holding? We're holding in Perek Mem Gimel. Pasuk. Let's start from Tezai. Okay. Vayar Yosef itom as Binyamin. Vayomer lasher al beisai. Havei yasa anoshim haboisa. So Yosef, seeing Binyamin with them, tells Asher al beisai to bring them into his house. Utvoyach tevach v'hachein, and to slaughter and prepare a meal. Ki iti yochlu ha'anoshim batzarayim. Okay. So he's bringing them into the house. That's one thing that's happening, is a spatial thing where he's bringing them to. And the purpose of bringing them to the house is to make them a meal, not stam a meal, big meal. And there's a time as well. They're going to eat it. That's all right. Okay? Mm-hmm. So now, this business of being in the house is very significant. And in my count, it appears 11 times, this bias, either that they're in Beis Yosef, or that they the Asher al bias. All these terms about the bias appear 11 times, until in Parashas Vayigash we have this is the 12th. Yosef calls out Vayishma Beis Parai. So there's a whole theme about the Beis Yosef, and everything revolves around the bias, and it's between these Anoshim and the Asher al bias. The Asher al bias, the person who's called Asher al bias, he's a big figure now. It's all revolving around the bias, because going into Beis Yosef is a very momentous event. Either they're being arrested, they can be locked up, as they suspect. What are we bringing into his house for? Mm-hmm. Must be he's coming to do something to us. Mm-hmm. Or, as he said, that he wants to eat with them. So going to the house of Yosef is a very significant event. This is not a normal thing. They're going into Mitzrayim for food. All of a sudden, they're going to the house of the Adonai Haaretz. It's very significant. Okay.
Are you now including bias of Paitifar also? Those references?
No, for 11 from here on. Now we talk about the Beis Yosef here. In this pasuk, from here, keeps on. This Beis Yosef is 11 times. Yes, it starts the whole business of Yosef and the bias. We have already in Beis Paitifar, and there's Ramazim over there about the bias and the Sadeh. We spoke about it a lot then, and it's actually going to come back again tonight. So yeah, there's that as well. Okay, now I want to just but we mentioned this last week, I think. Definitely mentioned it last week. I want to just point out once again what's happening in Sefer Amos regarding this parsha. Okay, in Sefer Amos, Perek Zayin, which has been always about Yosef and the brothers, Perek Zayin, really Perek Ches, more Perek Ches, but Perek Zayin as well. And just to remind you, what we have in Amos, Perek Zayin and Perek Ches, regarding this parsha, we have like this. There's the theme of the hunger in the end of Perek Ches, which is really for the Dvar Hashem. There's the sun setting Batzaharayim, that it becomes dark on the Nevi'im. And we also have the house of Yosef. What do I mean the house of Yosef? Because you look in Perek Zayin, so in Perek Zayin it talks about the Beis Yeravam will fall. That's in Pasuk Tes. And in Pasuk Yud Gimel, the Navi is warned not to be in Beis El, which is a Beis Mamlacha, again in Pasuk Yud Gimel. And he's warned in Pasuk Tes, Lo Satif al Beis Yitzchak. Okay, I think I missed one. There's Beis Yisrael and Pasuk Yud. I don't know if I said that one right. So there's Beis Yeravam, Beis Yitzchak, Beis Yisrael, Beis Mamlacha, and Beis El. And the other Ramazim that we spoke about last week. So, but Linyanenu, what Amos tells us is like this. Is we have to read this pasuk the following way. Okay, now that everyone is here, Vayar Yosef itam es binyamin. So now that all his family is here, now it's the time for his bias, i.e. his kingdom, his royal house, to be established. Because the whole debate, the whole tension between Yosef and the brothers was about Beis Yosef, meaning Beis Yosef as in the house, the dynasty of Yosef, the royal dynasty of Yosef. That's what it almost picks up on. Beis El, Beis Mamlacha, Beis Yitzchak, Beis Yisrael, Beis Yeravam, Beis Mamlacha, it's the king's house. So Yosef here is inviting him to the king's house, because now is the time where the Beis Yosef, meaning the royal house of Yosef, is being established. So Vayar Yosef itam es binyamin, Vayomer l'asher Beis, so like this. Okay, now it's time for my bias, and it's symbolism of a house, which is a malchus, to be established, because now we're all here together. Now they're all going to bow to me. And this all revolves around food, because I had my dreams about food, and there was a hunger. And that, and this we mentioned this last week, and that is an allusion to the Dvar Hashem, which the sun set on them in the Tzaharayim. Now they're going to eat in my house, and it's going to be clear as day. We're going to achieve Malchus, Beis Yosef, the Malchus of Beis Yosef, which hinges on the Eichel, and everything's going to be clear as day instead of the sunset of Nevuah that they've experienced thus far. That's what Amos tells us to read this pasuk. When Yosef saw Binyamin with them, he said, "Now we can eat together in my bias," meaning now the Beis Yosef, as in the Mamlocha of Yosef, is going to be established on the basis of our food relationship. That's going to be Tzaharayim instead of the opposite, instead of darkness. Okay. So now let's
kingship over whom?
Over them. I think over them. Yeah. Why not?
Right now, seems not to be.
What's that?
Seems not to have played out quite like that.
Why not? Welcome. Come. Sure, you can come in. We're deep into the shir, but please sit down. We'll make the proper introductions afterwards. Shalom, could you have Tanakh for them? Great. Okay. Continue where I'm up to, but please make yourself comfortable.
He sent them to be alone, so.
Okay, well he's ruling over them. They bowed to him. I mean.
Okay, that's enough.
Okay, so up to Parshas Miketz, Perek Mem Gimel, Pasuk Yud Zayin. We're reading Tez Zayin and Yud Zayin now. Okay. So the story is that Yosef is bringing them into his house to feed them, to give them food. But the next thing we know, as Pasuk Yud Ches tells us, so again, Perek Mem Gimel Pasuk Yud Ches. We don't do Parshas Shavua here. This is where we're up to. Started 10 years ago, and this is where we're up to. So. Okay, so Perek Mem Gimel Pasuk Yud Ches. So after Yosef says, "Okay, we're going to bring them into my house to eat," the pasuk says they were afraid. They were afraid because they were brought into Yosef's house, meaning they thought that there was some nefarious design, that Yosef was out to get them. Really, he's wanting to invite them to a meal, and they're afraid. And you have to ask the question, how to understand this in the narrative? Meaning, here he's inviting them in for a meal, and they happen to think that they're being invited in because he's trying to arrest them or harm them. So that seems to be just a random mistake that they made, which doesn't fit in any way to what was really happening. Right? He was really inviting them for a meal, but they happened to make a mistake. They thought that he's out to get them, and he said, "No, I'm not out to get you. Everything's fine. You're here for a meal." How does their fear of what he's trying to do to them, or what they think he's trying to do to them, how does that fit in? Does it fit in? You would think it would fit in to the fact that he was actually inviting them for a meal. Okay? And then we have to ask another question. So Pasuk Zayin says he told the person in charge of his bias, told him to do two things: bring them into the house and start preparing a meal, because I want to eat with them in the afternoon. Pasuk Yud Zayin says the man did as Yosef said. And Pasuk Yud Zayin further says he brought them into the house. Now, did he start preparing the meal? You have to ask that question. Did he start preparing the meal? Because if he did start preparing the meal, why are they being afraid? He brings them into the house. He's like, "Okay, guys, sit down," and he starts making a meal, because we're having a meal. So, but on the other hand, the pasuk doesn't say that he started preparing the meal, but l'chayra, he invited them in to have a meal. Yosef told him to do two things: bring them into the house and shecht an animal and make a meal. So if he brought them in and started shechting an animal, everything should have been clear. We're making a meal over here. However, if someone brings you into a house and he slaughters an animal, you might take that as a little bit of a symbolic threat. And I will show you that indeed that's what happened. So yes, he brings him into the house and he starts cutting an animal up. And like, okay, this is scary. And I'm going to show you this is actually what happened. And remember too, that this is not the first time in the Yosef narrative, that we meet a tabach, the tvicha. This Yosef is in the jail at the Sar HaTabachim, who is either a butcher or an executioner. Those are the two ways that people explain the Sar HaTabachim. So when Yosef invites him into his house and starts doing tivicha, slaughtering, that's perhaps a veiled threat that they are next. Okay, taking on the knife. And I'm going to show you this explicitly. Look in Yeshaya, Perek Yudalid, Pasuk Chafalef. Okay? I'll read the Pasuk, but in Yeshaya, Perek Yudalid, Pasuk Chafalef, amazing Pasuk. Pasuk says like this. Hachinu levanav matbeach ba'avoin avoisam. Prepare for his sons a slaughtering ba'avoin avoisam, due to the sin of their fathers. Okay, that's the pasuk. Now the context here has nothing to do with our parasha. However, here Yosef told the person in charge of his bias, he told him tvoyach tevach v'hachin. Prepare matbeach. And there the pasuk says nishai the same terms. Hachinu matbeach. And the pasuk says, prepared for the sons for the sins of their fathers. Okay, now if you remember, this was from last week. Last week we learned that Yaakov's message to his sons when they went off to Yosef was as follows. He told them like this. He told them, my life is done for. I'm a failure. I'm not trying anymore. When Yaakov said to him, Kasha shachalti shachalti, the way I lost my children, what that means is, whatever happens in the future doesn't matter to me anymore. Why is that important? Because Yaakov felt, not incorrectly, that all the tragedies that were befalling him, starting from the death of Rachel, were due to his sins. Starting to the death of Rachel, then Yosef being disappearing and Yaakov thinking he's dead. Now something's going to happen to Binyamin too because of me. That's why Yaakov doesn't want to send Binyamin with his children, and Shimon. That's why he doesn't want to send Binyamin with his children, because Yaakov has been suffering his whole life. One bad thing after another has been happening to him. So he recuses himself and he says, look, you know what? Nothing bad could happen to me anymore because I gave up. I give up. I'm no longer competing to have a good life. My life is over. And therefore you guys now, Hashem Shrev Rachmanos on you, I'm out of the picture. Okay, so now look at this pasuk. The next thing we know, Yosef makes them a matbeach. It's tvoyach tevach v'hachin. And we have this pasuk in Yeshaya that says, prepare a slaughter for them, and there it's figurative, for the sons due to the sins of their fathers. Now look how it fits in so perfectly, because well, look what happened. Yaakov told his children, Hashem is going to have rachmanos on you. You'll be successful. I'm out of the picture. Why would you be successful if everything until now went so terribly? Because I'm out of the picture. Well, the next thing they know, they're afraid. The first thing that happens is they're afraid, which means, just follow the cheshbon, that Yaakov's removing himself from the picture is now being cast. There's some doubt being cast on that because look, it's not working. He said, because I'm out of the picture. The next thing they know, they're afraid. Well, clearly then they're afraid that maybe they are suffering for the sins of their father. And here we have that figure of speech that, prepare them on matbeach, which means prepare them for slaughter because of the sins of their fathers. It's exactly what's happening to the brothers over here. You see? And more than that, I want to say like this. Yosef has an agenda to include Yaakov, to re-include Yaakov in the picture. Because why did Yaakov take himself out of the picture? Yaakov's like, my life is over. Right? My life is over. I'm done. Now, Yosef doesn't like that. For the simple reason, because Yosef is looking to bring Yaakov back to life, right? To bring him back, and for Yaakov to have his spirit once again. That's what Yosef is trying to achieve. But more than that, why does Yaakov consider himself to be a failure? Because Yosef is gone. Yosef is dead, Yaakov said. He said he's dead. But Yosef knows that he's not dead. So therefore, he's pushing back against what Yaakov just said. Kasha shachalti, shachal means to lose a child. So Yaakov's like, look, if I lost my children, I'm done. I'll lose Binyamin also, it doesn't matter to me. Yosef knows that Yaakov did not lose his children. So the cheshbon on Yaakov, from Yosef's perspective, is not closed. We're not moving on. We're still dealing with Yaakov. And therefore, the tvoyach tevach v'hachin, which is, yes, a veiled threat, is because we are still working within Yaakov's sins. Okay, and of course at the end of the parasha, when Yosef plants the Gavia and frames them and so on and so forth, that's bringing us back to when Rachel stole the Trophim, and that's the root of all Yaakov's problems, as we've been discussing, because Yaakov claims to be perfectly innocent because I never stole the Trophim, but yes, he did, or his wife did, whatever. That's where Yaakov's problems start. So Yosef is reopening that. He's saying we're not closed, we're not moving on past Yaakov. And you look in Pasuk.
How would he know that Yaakov had said this?
What?
How would he have known that Yaakov said this?
That's a silly question. I'm sorry. This is silly.
He's not alone. He's dreaming.
Come on.
Okay, fine.
I don't know. No. Okay.
Wait for now.
Yeah. Let's talk about that afterwards. I mean, it's not a silly question. I mean, it's not a silly. Obviously not a silly question. I mean, say it's not a valid question for
this part. Okay.
Right. Exactly. I'm saying we have to dig deeper to answer that question. That's like the underlying question of everything, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But let's get back. Let's get to that afterwards.
And the rule greater than a dream.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a lot to talk about. A lot of introductions to do. Yeah. But okay. Right. Fine. Right. No. It's definitely a valid question. I just mean to say, like, we're showing how the psukim follow. You always have to figure out, like, okay, so what's the real story behind that? Fine. Now, the fact that Yosef is bringing back the father, you see like this. Look in Pasuk of Gimel. Pasuk of Gimel. Again, we're in Paragraph Gimel. In Paragraph Gimel, Pasuk of Gimel, it says, he tells them, they said, okay, our money came back. We don't know how that happened. And he says, don't be afraid. Your God and the God of your fathers. So Chazal say, it's in your merit and the merit of your father. So Yosef is bringing back into what's happening to them. He's deliberately saying, this is about your father. This is about your father. And also in Pasuk Chav Zayin, we ask him, Hasholem Avihem Hazokim, Ha'idenu Chai. So he wants to know about the father. That's what he's concerned with, of course. And Ha'idenu Chai, he wants to know if he's still alive, whatever that means. He just asked if he's Sholem. But clearly he's concerned with the welfare of Yaakov. While Yaakov just got finished saying, I'm done, I'm over, Kasher Shecholti, Yosef is pushing back and saying, no, things that are happening to you are due to his merit, and we have to bring him back to life. Perhaps, is he alive? Can we resuscitate him? And of course, when Yaakov discovers that Yosef is still alive, but the Chiruach Yaakov, right, there's an issue of him being alive. Okay, but now, one more point about this. Right, about Yosef trying to bring back Yaakov's merit, okay? Look in Pasuk of Gimel. Yosef told him, don't be afraid.
No. Well,
yeah,
okay.
what?
Sir, okay.
Yes, thank you. The Ish told him, don't be afraid, because your God gave you a treasure. So we mentioned this last week, that the Pasuk says in Mishlei, Parak, I think, Beis, if you seek it like Kesef, if you look for it like kesef and a matman and a treasure, then you'll understand Yiras Hashem. So now, here the pasuk says, okay, don't be afraid of me. Your God gave you a treasure. Oh, wow. So maybe you should be afraid of your God. And that's what it says in Mishlei. That, if you want Yiras Hashem, seek it like kesef and a matman. This was a matman. This was a treasure of kesef, right? Mm-hmm. So that there's this allusion in this pasuk where you say, "Don't be afraid of me. Your God did it." Well, your God is awesome. You should be afraid of your God. So he's taking the vayiru we see in pasuk Yud Ches. They were afraid, and he's shifting it over to Yiras Hashem, right? And this brings us back to Yaakov because, as we discussed in the past Shurim, the pasuk says, referring to our story about who does Hashem take care of, who does Hashem protect from Rav. And Yosef is the powerful young man, and Yaakov is the Yireh of because Yaakov is the one who's Shamar es Hadavar, and he's, as the pasuk says, L'dvarei Hoicholti Yachad Yisrael Hashem Ki Hashem HaChesed. So Yaakov is the Yireh of, and he's the one who brings an end to the Rav when he comes to Parai. So Yosef is saying, look, this business of keeping Yaakov out of the picture, I'm not masking. I want to bring Yiras Hashem back to the story, and back and to Mitzrayim, and that's going to happen through Yaakov. He's the Yireh Hashem who's Miyachal Mechasta. Okay, perhaps it brings us back to Vayira Vayomer Manera Makom Hazeh, which is the root of the debate about Yosef and the brothers, because the brothers said, Yaakov said, I shouldn't have gone to sleep, and Yosef says, but he did go to sleep. Okay, that's talking about Chalomis. Say that. Okay, so basically Yosef is bringing back Yaakov into this picture. So back to the question I was asking. I started off like this. I said, okay, here we have this, bring them into the house to feed them a meal. But then they get afraid. So is that just a red herring that they think something else is happening? But no, the answer is actually the meal, the tevach, and the fear are very much associated. Because first of all, the tevach is what induces the fear, because it's suggestive and symbolic of some threat to them. And also because the fear is not just a side thing that happened. Yosef wants them to be afraid, because by being them afraid, he's reintroducing Yaakov into the story, because Yaakov is the one who stands for Yiras Hashem. And they were afraid of the fact that, and maybe we are dealing with the sins of our fathers. So the fear and the bringing back Yaakov all go together. Okay. Fine. Now another word on Pasuk Tezayin. So Pasuk Tezayin has this phrase, Tvayach Tevach. Okay? Tvayach Tevach. Interesting phrase. This repetition of the root Tevach. So now, there's one other place in Tanakh where we have this. Shalom, do you remember where? We've looked up this pasuk before. And you might know it anyways. Anyone else could know it too? No? Pasuk in Tanakh. Okay, so take a look at Mishlei. I don't know where. Yeah. Find out where you're coming. Okay, so look at Mishlei Parak Tes. And Mishlei Parak Tes is one of the places where we have this, okay? And Mishlei Parak Tes goes like this. Mishlei Parak Tes says, Chochma, wisdom, builds a house. So wisdom in Mishlei Parak Tes is personified. Wisdom is like a female who, she has a house, she builds a house, and Tavcha Tivcha Mascha Yeno. She makes a whole spread, a whole meal. She slaughters the meat, pours the wine, sets the table, sends out the kids, sends out her maidservants, Agape Mere Mekares, which means in the high places, and they call out Mi Pesi Yosser Heina. Whoever's a fool, come here, we'll make you smart, eat my bread, drink my wine, and you become a Chacham and Yiras Hashem. Okay? That's the first half of Parak Tes in Mishlei. The second half, starting from Pasuk Yud Gimel, contrasts this with a woman who's called the foolish woman, and she sits at the door of her house, also Kisei Merei Mekaris, also in a high place, and she also calls Mi Pesi, whoever's a fool, come here, but not come here because I'm going to teach you, but rather come here, and she's trying to seduce him, and she says stolen water is famous pasuk, Mayim Geduv Mitaku, stolen water is sweet, and Lechem Star Minam, the hidden bread is pleasant, and he doesn't realize how this is an awful thing to do. This young man, this fool, who's going to follow her into the house. Okay, so that's what it says in Mishlei. There's two women, the wisdom, one of them is personification of wisdom, and one of them is the foolish woman who's trying to seduce the young man, and they both call to the Pesi, they both sit in a high place, and the foolish woman sits by Pesach Besa. Okay. As we've discussed in Parashas Vayeshev at length, a lot of these Prakim and Mishlei, particularly Parak Zayin and Parak Tes, reflect the education of Yosef. Yosef starts off from the beginning of Parashas Vayeshev as a young man, a nar, and in order for him to become a king, he had to undergo certain trials and certain changes, certain experiences. Specifically, he had to withstand the temptation of Eshes Potifar, and that's a lot of what's happening in this Psukim Mishlei. The wife of Potifar is called the bread, because the pasuk says over there that the only thing that the master of Yosef withheld from him was the bread, and the pasuk also says the only thing that the master of Yosef withheld from him was his wife. So the lechem is a mashal for the isha, and here also the pasuk says that the foolish woman seduces the nar. It says lechem storim yinam, stolen bread is the best. Okay, that's one of the references, many references. So Yosef had to, in order to become the king, he had to basically learn Mishlei, which is an education to a young man. Don't be a fool. Don't follow the pleasures, narishkeit of this world, but rather study wisdom, and then you could rule. So, it's, by the way, it's the Mishlei Shloimeh who became a king, and he talks about this, my father educated me. So Yosef too, in order to become the king, had to undergo this education. Okay, so then Okay, so then it makes sense that this pasuk where it says Yosef was tvoyach tevach, and this is when the brothers are going to come bow to him all together. This parallels Mishlei Perek Tes, where it talks about wisdom as making a meal. Okay, but I'm going to show you how it's even more connected. Because let's go back to our parak here in Parashas Miketz. So look at pasuk Yud Zayin. Pasuk Yud Zayin says, "Vayaso ish kasher amar Yosef." Okay, fine. He did as Yosef said. And then it says, "Vayovei ha'ish eso anoshim beis Yosef." So first we have a question. Well, why does the pasuk say that? It says he did as Yosef said, which, as we mentioned, was two things: to bring them in and prepare the meal. So why does it then say, "And he brought them in"? Secondly, this statement in pasuk Yud Zayin that he brought them into the house of Yosef is repeated in pasuk Avdal. Take a look at pasuk Avdal. It says the exact same words. Vayovei ha'ish eso anoshim beis Yosef. Okay. So now, to understand what's going on here, we have to look at what happened in between. The pasuk says like this: He brought them to the house of Yosef. They were afraid because they were brought into the house of Yosef. They thought it's a trap. They said that he's bringing us into the house of Yosef because he's trying to take us as his slaves. So then look in pasuk Yud Tes. It says they went to speak to the Ish Ashel Beis Yosef, and they spoke to him Pesach Habayis. They didn't go in. Because since they were afraid that the house is a trap, so he brings them Beis Yosef, meaning he attempted to bring them, but they, being afraid about what's in store for them, said, "Wait a second, before we go in, we have to clear up something with you. Are you upset about us about the money or not?" He's like, "No, the money is cool. God gave you a gift, and fine." Okay, then he brings them into the house. So that's why pasuk Yud Zayin speaks out Vayavei Eshes Harash Beis Yosef, because it's not only saying that he did as commanded. It's saying he did as commanded. Here's how. He brought them in, but they were reluctant to go in, and they stood by the door until he assuaged their fears and said, everything's fine, and that's when they only entered. Okay? So now we have the Pesach Habayis, this standing here and talking by the doorway, this liminal space, the edge of the house, represents the fact that this house is potentially dangerous for them, right? And now look at Mishlei Perek Tes. As I mentioned, but now you see how significant it is. In Mishlei Perek Tes, pasuk Yudalid, where it talks about the foolish woman, the pasuk says the foolish woman sits Pesach Beisa. She sits by the door of her house. Because the Pesach Habayis is that place where you have to pause before entering. The Pesach Habayis means maybe you shouldn't indicate that. Do you want to cross the threshold? Maybe this place is dangerous. So in Mishlei Perek Tes, we have the woman, the chachma who's tavcha tivcha and invites the pesi, the fool, and says, "Come, eat with me," and they become wise. It's great, okay. And then you have the foolish woman. She says, "Al Pesach Beisa," and that's a warning. Pesach Beisa, maybe you shouldn't cross the threshold. And she tries to get him to come in, despite the fact that it's a bad idea for the youth to go into that house. Now, in the Yosef story, the brothers were facing the potential. There's two ways to read this invitation. Either Yosef is a threat to them, he's out to get them, or Yosef is a good guy. Now, what does that depend on? That depends on Yosef's experience. Now you're going to ask me the question again, how do they know all this? Okay. But this depends on Yosef's experience in Mitzrayim, because Yosef went to Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, he could have either followed Eish Potifar, confirmed himself as a foolish young man, and remained so, and then he would have taken it out on his brothers. Their fears would have been justified. And then they should stay on the Pesach Habayis. Don't go in. Just like the Nar is not supposed to follow that. Ishas Ksilos, who's saying, "Come eat my bread," they also shouldn't eat Yosef's bread. But since Yosef withstood Mishlei Perek Tes, and he actually didn't follow the foolish woman, and therefore he started off as a Nar in the beginning of Yeshiva, but he became a Chacham who's worthy of ruling, worthy of having power, therefore they can enter his house.
They don't have to know who he is. They have to know that there are two kinds.
Right, I know. So here it's not a problem.
Right.
Yes, for sure.
They're trying to determine which he is.
Exactly.
They ask a question and they get an answer.
Exactly. Right. In other words, 100%. They don't have to know all this background. In other words, the brothers' fear of who this person is, right? There's two possibilities. Is this person dangerous or not? Which we, knowing that it's Yosef, we know that it depends on Yosef's experiences in Mitzrayim, which the Sefer Mishlei is using as a mashal of a young man and how he has to grow up. And yes, of course, this is a whole different level than what we were talking about before, because before we were talking about words that Yosef is using, which only make sense in the context. 100%. I know. Okay, so that's why. So again, so here we have Tavcha Tevach, and there in Mishnah we have Tavcha Tivcha, and yes, they do correspond because Yosef is the son who became wise, and therefore his house is an inviting place, not a dangerous place. While had he been the other son, who remained a nar chasar leiv, as the pasuk calls it over there, the foolish young man, then, and he would have remained so had he followed the woman who's al Pesach Beisa and says come in and introduce him to come in, and he doesn't realize how it all ends up in the depths of Sha'il, then indeed his house would have been dangerous for the brothers. Okay, and one last thing I want to end with, the pasuk notes here in that they're going to eat in Miketz, that they're going to eat batzarayim, that they're going to eat in the afternoon. And this, a few of the Mefarshim point this out, that the pasuk in in Keheles, talks about how important it is that the ruler of a kingdom should eat at the right time and not in the morning. Okay, and this is in Keheles, Perik Yud pasuk Tezayin. It says, Iloch eretz shemalkich nar. Woe to you, a land, if your king is a nar, is a youth, and your ministers v'sarayich ba'boker yechelu. So a land that's ruled by a nar, and it's ruled by sarim, by ministers who eat in the morning, that's bad for it. Ashrech eretz shemalkich ben chorem. Fortunate is a land whose kings are free men, v'sarayich ba'es yechelu, and your sarim eat at the right time. So the morning is the wrong time for the rulers to eat. The nar, if the nar is a ruler who eats in the morning, the good land is the one who is ruled by a sar who eats at the right time. Now, these psukim are referring to Yosef and Parai, that we spoke about at the beginning of Miketz, so we don't have to review that. But what the Mefarshim shtel to over here is that, Yosef is saying, no, I don't eat in the morning. Why doesn't Yosef eat in the morning? Because he's a busy man. He doesn't get up and say, let me go and have a nice big breakfast. He's taking care of his country. So he's the sar who eats ba'es, who eats at the right time, not in the boker, because he's an important person who's doing important things. He's a chacham, and he's focusing on wisdom. He's not focusing on enjoying himself. Therefore, the first thing he does with his day is not eat. First thing he does is make sure there's enough food for his subjects, and then batzarayim comes time he's going to eat. That's what they compare from that pasuk. But in Yenenu, the point is like this. The point is that Yosef at this point is showing the brothers that he's not a nar. The pasuk over there in Keheles says, the nar who rules the country eats in the morning. Yosef started the story of the narrative of his brothers as a nar. And here, they're at risk of putting themselves in the hand of this potentially vicious and dangerous, wicked king. But by the fact that he's eating batzarayim and not in the morning, that indicates that he graduated from a nar, and now he's a wise king because he learned wisdom, and he's not going to harm them. Okay, we will leave it at that. And shalom aleichem to the guests. I mean, not guests.